in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth,
and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord,
who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary,
suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. The third day he rose from the dead.
He ascended into heaven, and sitteth at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the quick and the dead.
I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints,
the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread.
and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Good morning, my friends, and welcome to Douglasville First United Methodist Church. I am Pastor Roger Vest, and today is Sunday, July 9th. Today I continue a series on imperfect heroes in the Bible, and today we're going to be focusing on Sarah, wife of Abraham, mother of Isaac. So it's going to be interesting to hear what she has to teach us from her experience in faith. So, passage from Hebrews, all this is based in Hebrews chapter 11. The verse in Hebrews 11 that references her is verse 11, and it says, "By faith, Sarah received power to conceive, even though she was too old, since she considered him faithful who had promised." She considered God faithful who had promised. Then we go back to Genesis, and we read kind of the original story. We're going to read some from chapter 16 and some from chapter 21. Chapter 16. Excuse me. Now, Sarah, Abram's wife, or Abraham, bore him no children. And she had an Egyptian slave girl whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said to Abram, "You see that the Lord," listen to this, "the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. So go into my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abraham listened to the voice of Sarah. So after he had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her slave girl, and gave her to her husband Abram, as a wife. He went into Hagar, and she conceived, and she looked with contempt on her mistress. Then Sarah said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be done to you. I gave my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." No happy wife, happy life. But Abram said to Sarah, "Your slave girl is in your power. Do to her as you please." Then Sarah dealt harshly with her, and Hagar ran away. And then we go to chapter 21 and the 2 verses there. "And the Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him." This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. So we're looking at the life of one of the one of the main characters of the Old Testament. Abraham, or Abram, he starts off as Abram, becomes Abraham, is known as the father of three different religions. He is the father of Judaism, obviously, and then Christianity through Isaac, but then through Ishmael, he's known as the father of Islam. So it's kind of interesting, and if you read the story there in Genesis, you'll see that God promised Hagar that your son would be the leader of a great nation as well. So the promise he made to Abraham was fulfilled in 2 different ways. But, we look at Sarah, and, at one point we look back and when you look back, oftentimes you gloss over some of the details and you think of the highlights. And so we know Sarah was faithful. We know Sarah bore Isaac. We know that she laughed, and because Isaac's name means laughter. And there's just a variety of things. But, as we look through the way it came about, I think there are some lessons for us here. And so at the very beginning, when we didn't read this passage, but when God spoke to Abraham and said, "Even in your old age, you will bear a son, whose descendants will be greater than the stars in the sky and more than the grains of sand on the seashore." And Sarah overheard this, and she laughed. She laughed at God the first time she heard the news that Abraham would be the father of a great nation. I don't know if you've ever laughed at God. You ever heard heard a message that God had convicted you of something and wanted you to do something that you considered so crazy, so out of the ordinary, so out of your, to use the current term, so out of your comfort zone that you couldn't do anything but laugh. God, are you crazy? You want me to do what? This is going to happen? And so at the very beginning, Sarah not really doubted. Well, yeah, she kind of doubted. She kind of scoffed, but she laughed at God. And really what we find out from her is she heard the promise, and even though she laughed about it, she clung to it. Because she had gotten to an age where she was past childbearing age. And in that culture, a woman's worth was tied to the children that she bore, particularly male children. And so you could still live a good and fruitful life, but there was something missing. That child, it was missing in her life. And so she clung to that promise and yearned for that promise. And she was, Abraham was probably, in his 70s, 80s. He was well past, and she was too, well past the time when they should bear children. And so as the years go on, as time goes on, she becomes impatient. She got tired of waiting on God's timing. Think about that. Ever had a promise, ever yearned for something, ever felt like this is what God wants me to do, and door after door gets closed, path after path gets blocked, and you just wonder, when is this going to happen? And sometimes people give up. And they say, well, I guess it's never going to happen. I thought I heard God's voice. Maybe I didn't, and we begin to doubt our own thoughts and our own convictions. Or sometimes, as what Sarah did, we kind of try to jumpstart the process. Well, if this is going to happen, I'm tired of waiting. I'm going to do something. And we find out that oftentimes when we jump the gun on God's will, things take a turn. Things get complicated, let's put it that way. And so she got tired of waiting on God's timing. She even blamed God for her condition. She told Abraham, God's the one that has made me barren. God's the one that kept me from having children. And so she goes a step further than doubt. She she actively blames God. Now it's interesting here. She still believes in God, and she's still, in a sense, holding on to the promise, but she's also, angry, and she blames the Lord for her condition. I don't know if you've ever done that. I've seen people do that. There are times when you're in the midst of a difficult time, it's easy to blame God for what has happened. And so she decided to help the process along by giving her slave to her husband. Now, in today's world, that's just, there's all sorts of things that are wrong with it. But just suffice to say that Sarah jump-started the process, went around God's timing, and decided to work on her own. And her efforts made things worse. I mean, that's what we found out. Hagar looked on her with contempt. And then Sarah got angry and was cruel to Hagar. And you see, go back and forth. And, just like you said, and poor Abraham was caught in the middle. And he tries to stay out of the way. But, it's interesting how that happens, and how sometimes, even though what we mean for good, it turns out to be the wrong thing. And again, that depends on, are we listening truly to the will of God? And are we willing to abide by the timing of God's will? Sometimes that's tough. A lot of times that's tough. I don't like to wait. I don't know, you hear the phrase, Lord, give me patience. And people say, well, you don't want to pray for patience because God will give it to you. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is to wait. So at the end, in chapter 21, we find out that the Lord is faithful to his promises in God's time. God is faithful to his promises. He had promised Sarah, and he was faithful to his promise, and she bore a son, and she named him Isaac. She received power to conceive, even though she was too old. And she praised God, and she said, God has brought laughter for me. It's interesting. So that whole term laughter is both a reminder of her doubt. She laughed at God at the beginning, but also a reminder of God's grace, that, when she got this, God brought joy back into her life again. And so we see in the midst of this that God is faithful, and he will always be faithful. But we just got to be careful about the timing. Even though Sarah doubted, she scoffed, she was angry, she blamed God. In the midst of all the things that she's done wrong, she has a wonderful lesson to us. She, in the end, was faithful to God, and God blessed her and fulfilled the promise he had made to her. As we go about our life, there are going to be times when God's timing is not our timing, and we just need to hang on, hold on, keep praying, remain faithful. Even if you have to question God, share your concerns with God. Go to God in prayer and say, Lord, when is this going to happen? Father, I'm angry right now. God can handle that. But strive to remain faithful, strive to remain patient, because we know that God is faithful to keep his promises. Amen. Amen.
sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. For nothing good have I, whereby thy grace to cling. I will wash my garments white in the blood of Calvary's Lamb. Lord, now indeed I find thy power and thine alone can change the leper's spots and melt the heart of stone. My Jesus paid it all, and all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. I'm washed by his blood. When from my dying bed my ransom soul shall rise, Jesus died my soul to save, shall rend the vaulted skies, and when